Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Fullcast Fireside Chat. I'm your host, Tyler Simons. I am the head of customer success here at Fullcast, and we are a go-to-market planning and execution platform. So it's interesting. It's this time of year, everybody's planning, right? We're like quota this, territory that. But what I feel like sometimes gets forgotten about is the enablement needed for the go-to-market plan to be successful. And today we're bringing Dan Watkins with Database on to help us unpack this. Dan, why don't you give us a rundown on what you've been up to lately?
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, so Dan Watkins, I started in the basement with Qualtrics back in 2007 as employee number 15, led sales globally for them until we got acquired by SAP. Had a blast doing that. Then have been helping startups ever since. And so I advise CEOs and founders in how to run go-to-market for their business and operations. And so I've been spending a lot of time with early stage companies, as early as Series A, all the way to companies getting ready to go public, is how they need to go re-architect their go-to-market strategy. And one of the most common things that I see, people pay a lot of attention to quota. What number do we have to go hit? That goes all the way to the board. They're paying attention often to pipeline generated and other activities. Sometimes they miss that. Almost always their enablement strategy is an afterthought. I can't tell you how many executive meetings I've been in talking about, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to hire this many people, we're going to go do that. And they don't even think about how are we going to develop the people so that they actually succeed. And what is our enablement strategy? And so I was spending a lot of time with executives building out that strategy and CEOs to make sure that it's funded from the beginning.
So this is interesting. I think we're going to get into the details here in terms of like enablement, go-to-market planning, but why don't we level set with everybody and talk about, in your terms, what enablement is? Like when you talk about enablement, what do you see happening? What are kind of like the things that the components of enablement, if you will?
Yeah, and it's a little different for each company. But enablement to me, if you just look at the definition of it, are you enabled? So as a CRO, you're going to go and set a revenue target. You're going to go and say, we have to get this many deals, this, whatever it is. How do you go get there? And that's the technology stack that you have. Like, okay, are you enabled that way? And are you trained to even use the technology that you have, whether it's your CRM, whether it's your performance management software? I forgot my intro. I'm actually the founder and chairman of the board for a company called Database that for performance management. But so anyway, so enabling the team with the right technology, enabling the team with the right content. And so that content can be they can be marketing materials and pulling it together in an easy to digest form, but it's also training. And often it's called training and enablement, but you take all of the enablement strategies that you have, and then how are you developing your people to go get there? And so that's how I think of training and enablement, is that they're combined together. They report into revenue operations. I know we're going to talk about that as we kind of go throughout, but that it is the business unit responsible for enabling the vision of the CRO. That's the enablement team.
Great. So why, you mentioned this, why, enablement reporting into revenue operations, or revenue operations is responsible for it. What are some of the things that you've seen? Well, I guess the first question is really, why should revenue operations be responsible for enablement? And two, maybe what are some of the other examples of like scenarios where they haven't been reporting up to revenue operations, maybe straight to sales or to finance, and some of the gotchas there?
Yeah, so there's one major caveat is I'm assuming revenue operations reports into sales. If revenue operations is reporting into marketing, is reporting into other functions of the business that are finance or something like that, then I wouldn't recommend that revenue operations run enablement. But assuming revenue operations is reporting into the CRO or vice president of sales, then my assumption is that director, COO, or whoever the head of revenue operations is the most aligned executive to the VP of sales, the go-to-market leader that's going to go get everything done. And so the enablement team, if they have access to the top executive that knows the strategy so cold that they can actually go and get it done. And whereas I've seen things get really kind of wonky as enablement starts to be called enablement, but in reality, all it is onboarding training. And then onboarding training, all it becomes is HR training, because enablement reports into HR.
Yeah.
And so I've seen that be a major miss, and it doesn't end. The sales team's constantly complaining about another training because it's HR oriented, or it's just the next security training rather than being trained on the things that actually get them really good at their jobs. So I've seen that not go well. You look like you're about to ask something.
Well, yeah, no, but I don't want to interrupt, but I'm just curious, like, let's say I'm a person listening to this and that's exactly what's happening. Let's say enablement reports into HR or finance. How might I go about trying to change that culture or starting to like make enablement what we think it should be, which is, not just training and onboarding, but just the whole scope, right? The tech stack, the content, and the enablement and ongoing training of like, how do you sell the product, so on and so forth. Like, where would somebody start in an organization to like try and change that towards the better?
Yeah, so I've had the unfortunate experience of having to unravel that in so many different groups, either that I've advised or even at my time at Qualtrics, where it gets so encumbered with HR practices that it loses the identity of sales enablement or of enablement in general. And so the first thing that I would go in and do is, one, talk to your VP of sales, your CRO, and ask them what their vision for enablement is. If they don't care and they're fine that it's onboarding and training, then you've got really two things that you can go and do. One, talk to them about how it could be different and see if they actually will care. Or if you're an enablement minded leader that has a broader vision, maybe go look for a different company. Because if the VP of sales or the head of revenue, CRO, doesn't actually care, enablement is not a core part of their strategy, and after talking to you as to what it could become, still doesn't really get excited about it, go take your time and energy with somebody that does. Because if at the very top of revenue, if they don't care about enablement, even after you've explained what it can become, that the content will be purpose driven, that it'll actually be aligned with what the CRO wants to happen in the organization, the new techniques they're going to use, that the tech stack, that they're going to get rid of the garbage that just clutters people's calendars or clutters people's days with data entry that doesn't actually solve any problems. That the training is aligned with sales skills that matter. If they don't care about that, I'd suggest you go and you look somewhere else and go find an executive that does. If they do, then ask them if they're willing to sponsor you across the executive team in that reorganization. Or, and if they're not willing to go and talk with HR about pulling training and enablement into revenue operations, then ask if you can create basically a duplicate organization. Call them enablement people, not trainers. Don't call them onboarding specialists. Don't call them anything that's going to create red flags internally. Yep. And then you go and you start hiring enablement people that literally go and do everything other than what the HR team was doing.
And that was exactly going to be my question, because I was like, what if you just created a kind of like a same style organization within the organization that kind of just did that? And I think that would be a good approach if you're just hitting roadblocks there.
Yeah. And I would recommend from a staffing standpoint that you do if you can get as high as a 1-to-25 ratio. So for every 25 people in SDR land, in account executive land, field sales, customer success, anybody touching the client, 1-to-25 would be the best. 1-to-50 would be about as light as you'd want to go from a staffing perspective.
But why is that?
Part of it is so that you can actually go in and work one-on-one. When enablement organizations have reported into me as the head of revenue, every enablement person has enablement targets with teams that they support. So imagine you have 25 people that you're supporting, and you're working, I don't know, it's a region of individuals selling roughly the same product to roughly the same type of buyer, but they each have different problems. Some of them are struggling at pipeline generation. Some are struggling at discovery. Some are struggling at closing deals. Some are struggling at renewing and expanding, whatever it might be. If you have it at 1-to-25, you have enough space to partner with the sales manager or the customer success leader and create individualized goals for the team. At 1-to-50, or sorry, for the individual. At 1-to-50, you can do it at the team level. And so you can say, okay, sales manager or customer success manager, what is the number one sales skill that we're going to go work on? Is it converting at the discovery level? Is it pipeline generation? Is it closing? Is it stage progressions? What is it? And then, okay, we're here today. by the end of the quarter, we're going to get here, and you align with that frontline leader. If you have it 1 to 25, you can do it all the way down to the rep level, and you get real personal with the people you're helping, and then they buy into enablement too, because like, wait a second, I'm better empirically after working with this team.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think we're going to come back to this goal piece because I want to start to look at how we might be able to set goals. So we're going to take this 1 to 25 thing, and we might set some goals as it relates to the go-to-market plan and the rollout, and kind of tie all this stuff together. But let's talk a little bit about how enablement can help you jumpstart the execution of a go-to-market plan. So we do all this planning, and maybe we take a step back, right? Let's actually take a step back now that I'm thinking about this. We all start talking, let's say 6 months before year end, fiscal year end. We're all thinking about the strategy. Then I'm going to walk us through a typical planning timeline. We're thinking about that. We usually get a number from finance. Then there's some capacity planning that's done to figure out, how many people do we need to hire to get to that? Where are we going to put them? Then there's typically some territory planning. Let's carve out all the world of accounts, some quota setting. Where do you see enablement fitting into this timeline of events? Should they be involved at the very beginning when strategy is being formulated? Do they need to be involved in each of the stages to understand, okay, well, this is what go-to-market's going to look like, and so I got to develop, maybe I need to roll out a tool or enable something within tools. Maybe I need to put content together. Where should we have enablement plugged into this process so that we end up getting to a point when we flip the switch on our go-to-market plan, enablement's ready to go, and the reps are like excited about what's about to happen?
So somebody who is aware of enablement and what they do should be there from the beginning. But a lot of organizations, if they're just starting in enablement, they're not going to hire a director level individual who is going to add value to those strategic meetings. And so it would be annoying for everybody else in the room if it's like, okay, you've got the VP of sales, you got the VP of marketing, VP of customer success, and then you have somebody who's 2 years out of college who's responsible for enablement that's in the room on all the meetings. So if it's in that case where enablement's just starting, you have somebody really early in it, I would bring them in towards the end. But then that VP of sales or the director of RevOps or somebody who is strategic needs to be contemplating, okay, what is enablement going to be doing from the beginning? Why is it that we set our targets at this level? They need to be able to answer those questions to whoever's executing on the enablement side. And so if you have a senior leader for enablement, absolutely have them from the beginning. And when I ran my last role where I had about 500 people at Qualtrics, I had my global head of enablement from the very beginning. And I mean, we had a ratio of, I think we were 1 to 35 there. For my organization. And because I wanted every part of the strategy him to be aware of. And then he was able to go and deploy that across all of his teams through every step that you talked about. But if you're starting over in a startup and you have one person who does enablement for the 30 reps that you have, and that person's 3 years out of school, you probably have somebody else that's sharing with them the vision, and they don't need to be in necessarily all the meetings.
Yeah, it's like the head of RevOps or the head of sales is the person that's playing that head of enablement strategy role that then communicates that to the person that will just kind of go and build and execute all that stuff. So let's say you have, I think what would be interesting is to understand some of the questions or the perspective that a head of enablement, let's say you do bring in a head of enablement at that first conversation. What are some of the things that person should be thinking about at that exact, like those strategy conversations? If they wanted to go ahead and contribute to the conversation, questions they should be asking, things that they should be thinking about.
I would say the emotional state of the reps and the sales managers that are now going to be impacted by these new targets. What are we going to go do to make sure that they're still fired up and excited, that they buy in to what we're going to go do? So there's an emotional component to it. How does the tech stack need to change, and what admins for that tech stack are they going to need to go work with so that this can get done? What content do they have a plethora of, and versus are they short on, in order to go kind of nail the new messaging? Do they need to go partner with marketing? So there's a lot of personal APIs they need to be thinking about as they're in it. Then, okay, now sales skills wise, if we're really going to go and increase quotas, and we're going to hire less people because we assume our win rate is going to be higher, where in the sales funnel are we broken? And what training and enablement are we investing in to go get there? And then, I mean, my advice for any client that's using database or anybody that we talk to that way, do you have rep specific targets for every stage of the funnel? So if we're broken at the end, we're not winning enough deals. Have you taken the time on the enablement team to break down where is that busted at the rep level? Then at the team level, then at the director level, then at the VP level, so that you're investing the right amount of enablement at the for each of the skills that are missing. Because a lot of people focus on win rate and they go spend $500,000 for a half-day seminar, and they invite a really cool firm to come and teach them something, and it's exciting for a month, and then nobody remembers it. And the enablement team is the only one that's going to get that institutionalized.
Yeah. And this goes back to our beginning point of having enablement roll up into RevOps if RevOps is part of sales, right? Because I think what I'm hearing from you is specific reporting and like looking at your funnel, right? Like even if you don't set the goals, at least you're looking at the funnel and you're breaking that down and seeing, okay, well, where's the choke point in the pipeline, right? And that's what RevOps does. And so the closer those two worlds can work together, the better, because you'll have a better outcome.
Yeah, because you have the RevOps team that knows all the data they're supposed to. You have the enablement team needing to know how to go actually loosen those chokeholds. And so if those two teams are working close together, you've actually got a marriage that can happen. Too often, either enablement's an afterthought. Oh yeah, go build this. We need a deck that talks about how to do this. Go build that for us. And that's A, not exciting for the enablement person, and B, rarely going to get the reps fired up. They're probably going to say, oh, it's just another deck developed by enablement that we're not going to use. Whereas if enablement is in every one of the strategy meetings with the RevOps most senior leader or with the VP of sales, then it's going to actually match the vision that was there from the beginning.
Yeah. I think a good example of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in those meetings, you might decide that you're going to go all in on financial services this year. You're going to pick an industry, you're going to go deep into an industry. And I think that having enablement in those conversations gives them that lead up for them to start to know, okay, well, we got to start building content and training, and maybe there's tools that need to be involved there that can support us going deep into a vertical. And that, because a rep might like, oh yeah, I sort of like sold into this, but maybe it's kind of happenstance. So if you're going to have them go deep into that, then they're going to need to have the expertise, know all the right nomenclature and whatever else there is.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, like, if you even think about like why we called this fireside chat 1/3 of your go-to-market focus should be in enablement, it's that what 1/3 is going to be around what is the quota. And that just has to be set. It's finance aligned. 1/3, what is the work you have to go get done in order to hit that? And then 1/3, how are you going to go train every single person with the right materials, tech stack, and training in order to actually go and succeed? If you go and you look at, like, if it's the military, like I haven't even seen it yet, but I can bet that the newest movie Maverick, there is going to be a huge portion of time just training on the mission that they're going to go get done. And then they're going to do the mission. Well, the end mission is the quota.
Yep.
But everybody just talks about that and they do no strategy to go get there. Go watch any successful military venue. They spent an insane amount of time training and enabling the people so that when they actually go out and they're living in the real world, they're capable of handling all those situations. And that's why we have to remember that third that often gets forgotten, the enablement.
Yeah, because you don't need to think about it. It's just execution at that point.
Yes.
Right. What about communication of the sales strategy, right? Like, I think that there's this piece, this is just my like what I've seen with customers and just being in the planning world, is that there's a lot of the sales strategy changes. Maybe you change segment lines, maybe you go into verticals, maybe you go into like, you're going to go roll out APAC, whatever the strategy is, right? A lot of that starts to change, but I think the communication to the reps gets dropped. Like, why are we doing this? Kind of really, why are we doing this, right? And then also supporting them. So do you feel like that is an enablement responsibility? And do you have any like examples of how you might tackle that to make sure that that gets done and reps feel like they've been a part of that conversation, or they understand where that company's headed?
Yeah. And again, as soon as you possibly can have a senior enablement leader and having them in those meetings, somebody that will go and make sure that vision is shared, that's the best way of doing it. If you can't hire a senior enablement leader, your RevOps leader has got to go buy into the idea that 1/3 is all around enablement, and part of enablement is that vision of where we're going, why we're going to go get there, and then they build the plan to go do it. Okay, as part of our enablement strategy to go and nail this finance vertical, using the analogy you were using earlier, or the example you were using earlier, we're going to go and spend an hour just talking about why this matters. Because if you look at it, force management uses a concept of first teach the principles, why it matters, then show them how it gets done in the real world, then observe them doing it in the real world. Same thing with vision. If you don't go spend that, okay, go show them or teach them why this vertical is so important to our company. Then show them financial statements of the types of customers that we're going to go after, the ideal customer profiles. Then let them go on LinkedIn and see if they can pick those ideal customer profiles on their own and come back and share with you why it matters that they're going to go do that. Those types of things, enablement leaders just come second nature to them.
Yeah, that's super important that everybody takes that away, because I think that gets forgotten about. And whether you have an enablement leader or not, I don't know that I think a lot of people go build this territory plan out and kind of almost throw it over the fence. And you're going to be working financial services. Here's some content and we're going to help you. But I don't know that the time is, I think what's missed is the why we're doing this, and look at the opportunity here. And you get to be a part of this, right? Like that's the coaching of the strategy, and making like reps feel like they're bought in and a part of where the company is headed.
Yeah.
So where do you think people might miss the mark with enablement? What are some of the mistakes people make throughout this process?
Yeah. So I think number one is they have it reporting into HR. And so it's never an enablement team. It's an onboarding training team. So that's the most common mistake. Number two is it's not even considered. So they oh yeah, we have enablement, they work with HR. It's like, no, I don't even think about enablement. I'm just going to go and drive accountability without developing teams. And so if there are not at the very most senior level, at the vice president of sales, at the head of revenue operations, at the head of enablement, actual skill target increases that they're measuring. So whether it is, okay, we're going to go from a 2% win rate to a 10% win rate, or a 10% to a 15, 15 to 25, 25 to 30, that becomes a measurable that they hold themselves accountable to on the training side. That's another big miss. They only have, okay, we're going to have this much pipeline, we're going to have this pipeline multiple, and we're going to go hit this quota. Okay, well, what skills are we going to get better at to get there? So I think that's a major miss, is that at the most public targets that are shared across the company, they leave out enablement targets.
Mm-hmm.
Leave those out, then the team's going to think, okay, all I really got to do is hit my quota. If I got there by one deal that was an inbound lead that had nothing to do with my skills, that's just as good as if I did it through 4 deals that I found on my own and my win rate was above 40%. If it doesn't get that clear to a rep that those are not two equal worlds, then they're just going to go for the easiest way possible to hit their quota, lucky or not. And then what will eventually happen is your sales team's built on a house of cards.
Yeah.
And you start getting to a very, very low % of reps hitting quota.
Are you suggesting that people set targets against the reps as it relates to getting enablement done, or the enablement team has the same targets, so they know that, okay, I got to try and increase win rates, so I've got to provide content that I think is going to do that?
Yeah, so I actually, for any organization that I advise, own, or lead, the enablement team has a measurable target on each of these metrics. So if there is an outbound motion in the company, answer rate. So what percent of cold calls get answered? Set rate. What percent of those that answer agree to meet? Show rate. What percent of those that agree to meet show up? Opportunity conversion rate. Of those that show up, what percent convert into pipeline? Stage progression. So through each stage. Win rate, and average deal size. So the enablement team has that entire funnel, and every quarter an increase target. Okay, we're going to increase our global answer rate from 8% to 8.5%. And then they go and build individual tactics as to how they're going to go get there.
Yep. Okay.
And then same thing all the way down to average deal size. And that you have the most important one, that the VP of sales is like, let's say that a win rate. I remember one company I helped out, win rate was at 2%. And it's like, okay, we have to get it to 10% as soon as it's humanly possible, because it is brutal on the reps to have to call this much to only lose almost every deal. They were monster deals, and so they'd win one deal and it would cover up a lot. But either way, so anyway, the goal was to get it to 10% and then eventually to 25% as soon as possible. So you publicize that target. You talk about how the head of enablement is going to be working on this across the whole company, as well as these other metrics.
Yep.
But that we're going to go get there together as a team. And if that head of RevOps, head of enablement, and head of sales all have the same target, it's talked about as often as revenue and pipeline generation, then you see a lot more success and sustained success.
Everybody's aligned.
Yeah.
They're all rooting for the same camp. You talk a lot about, you've mentioned tech stack a couple of times. And the piece I just wanted to really tease out here is, how does that play? So you've got the target, right, that exists. Doesn't matter what it could be, win rate or new opportunities or whatever that might be, right? How does a tech stack play into like an enablement strategy to get that increase, right? I feel like there's like tech stack, and then there's also just like training and content that happens. How important is the tech stack part of this?
I think it's huge, because the tech stack is supposed to make everybody's job easier. You buy technology to make your job easier. Otherwise, you just have people do it. And so the enablement team should be looking at, okay, we just bought this software. Doesn't matter what the software is. Our job is to make it to where that software gets adopted, used, and those metrics that we're now talking about are easier to achieve.
Yep. And
so what they should be looking at is, if you just bought AI for forecasting, then you should be looking at, okay, well then our accuracy of forecast, and maybe the CRO also thought it was going to increase win rate because they were going to focus on the right deals. Okay, so we are going to go and invest in training this part of the technology to every rep. We're going to do a certification because we believe that's going to go work, and we're going to go help them. Or it's a CRM. Our hygiene is garbage. People are not entering this information in. As such, we have no idea on how to go help them. So we're going to take it on ourselves to go and train on that technology. And but in my opinion, there's a few parts of software that you need. We would have to spend another 30 minutes just talking about that. But what I would recommend to the enablement team is that you should be looking really closely at every piece of software that's been purchased for the revenue team. What have you done to make sure that it achieves the outcome that head of RevOps, head of sales thought was going to go in and happen?
Yep.
And align yourself to that.
Super interesting. It's amazing how fast these 30 minutes go. I'm telling you, I think part of me wants to extend these out, but part of me doesn't, because they're nice and short, right? So do you have any final parting thoughts for our audience today?
Yeah, the two bullet points I would say you do. One, ask yourself, are you part of an organization that buys into developing those around them? If you're part of that organization and you're in enablement, you've got an amazing gig. Go make something special of it. If you're not, see if you can change it. Get there, get the culture and the mindset changed. If not, leave. Go to an organization that believes in developing its people as part of the enablement strategy. Second is align yourself to measurables. Enablement teams get forgotten about and get cut because they're not aligned to measures or metrics that the CFO and the CRO care about. Align yourself to those enablement metrics that I was talking about and present at least once a quarter on the progress that you're making, and you will be the team that gets funded the most. So if you do those couple of things, and enablement's 1/3 at least of the go-to-market strategy, you'll have a lot of success.
And that's the biggest one for me too, is the alignment of those goals. I think that's huge. Never really thought about it that way, but that's kind of what I'm gonna walk away from this today. So Dan, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
Yeah, pleasure's
Really,
mine.
yeah. And until next time, thanks everybody for coming in.
Yeah,
Have a good
thanks.
one. See ya.
See ya.